So, good evening for those who are listening on YouTube and elsewhere. I just wanted to share a word out of John 11, which is John's account of the resurrection of Lazarus from the dead. And I won't read the whole thing, but I'll just read some of it. It starts off by saying that there was a certain man who was sick, Lazarus, of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. Now, it's about two miles out of Jerusalem. And obviously Jesus knew and loved Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. They were brother and two sisters. They lived in the same house, and he would go and visit them regularly. And it said that he received word. He was kind of up in the north, and he received word from them, the sisters. They sent a word to him saying, "Lord, the one that you love is sick." And when Jesus heard that, obviously the disciples heard the same message. Probably a messenger runs up to them and said, "Oh, are you Jesus?" Well, there's a message from Mary and Martha in Bethany, and they say that their brother, the one that you love, Lazarus, is sick. And would you mind very much getting your skates on and coming quickly to pray for him? But he tells his disciples and all those who are around and listening, he says, "This sickness isn't unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God may be glorified through it." Which is a bit of a sort of parable, really, isn't it? It's kind of slightly cryptic, because the disciples then say, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. If he's only just sick, he'll get better. Let's not worry about it." But it says, when Jesus heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. And then he said to the disciples, "Let's go to Judea again." So here was a family that really loved Jesus, and he really loved them. And they pray, and effectively it's like a prayer, isn't it? They say, "Lord, come and heal my brother," or "our brother." And when he heard that he was sick, he stayed 2 more days in the place where he was. So he stays an extra few days. Some Bibles say, despite loving them, he still stays 2 more days. But in my version, the New King James here, just says he stayed 2 more days. And then he says, "Okay, let's go to Judea again." He says to the disciples, and they said, "What? The Jews are just about to stone you, and why are you going back?" And Jesus says, "Well, aren't there 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he doesn't stumble because he sees the light of this world. But if one walks in the night, he stumbles because the light isn't in him." These things he said, and after that he said to them, "Our friend Lazarus sleeps." So what he said cryptically earlier was that he's just asleep. It's not a sickness unto death. Actually, he's now telling them, actually, Lazarus has died, but I'm going to wake him up. And the Lord and the disciples say, "Well, if he's asleep, surely he'll get well." But Jesus spoke of his death, but they thought he was speaking about taking rest in sleep. So, we can sometimes just misinterpret Jesus or slightly miss what he's saying. But as we discover that everything he does is for the glory of God. And Jesus said, Lazarus is dead, and I'm glad for your sakes that I wasn't there, that you may believe. Nevertheless, let's go to him. So Jesus said, this is for your benefit. You're going to see something which you'd never have seen if I'd gone earlier. So Thomas, who's called the twin, said to the fellow disciples, let's also go that we may die with him. So Thomas obviously thought this was a suicide mission and that they were going to end up in Jerusalem and then get arrested and they were all going to cop it. But again, he kind of misunderstood where Jesus was at and what the mission was. But kind of Jesus didn't hold it against him. I'm sure we're all the same, in many ways. So when Jesus came, he found that he'd already been in the tomb 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, a couple of miles away, and many of the Jews had joined the women around Martha and Mary to comfort them concerning their brother. Like mourners, sometimes professional mourners, they used to actually hire mourners to come and wail around the house just to kind of create a mourning atmosphere. But Martha, as soon as she heard that Jesus was coming, went and met him. So I kind of want to just draw a couple of things out. How Martha and Mary were both disappointed and quite grieved that A, their brother had died, and B, Jesus hadn't come when they asked him to. And they thought that if Jesus had come straight away, Lazarus wouldn't have died. But they both kind of behave in slightly different ways. So Martha goes straight to Jesus. As soon as she hears he's anywhere near, she leaves all the wailers and the mourners back at her house and just slips out. They don't really know where she's going. She might have just said she's just going to relieve herself, but she slips out the back and goes alone and finds Jesus because she knows the route he comes. So she says, I'm going to go that route and meet him before he gets here. And as soon as she arrives, she says, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask of God, God will give you. She kind of pours out her heart to Jesus at that point. Her doubts, her fears, her kind of grief. And she says, why didn't you come? Why didn't you come? If only you'd come. But he knew that this was actually for all of their benefit. Jesus said, your brother will rise again. Again, he's being a bit cryptic. He's kind of seeing what's in her heart and what she's going to say. Martha said, well, yeah, he will rise again at the resurrection on the last day. But Jesus then says, I'm the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me, though he may die, he shall live. And whoever lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? And she said, yeah, I believe that you're the Christ, the Son of God, who's come into the world. And when she'd said these things, she went her way and secretly called Mary, her sister, saying, the teacher has come and is calling for you. So while Jesus was talking to Martha about the resurrection and the fact that Lazarus will be resurrected, he says, where's Mary then? And Martha says, oh, she's kind of back at the house. She knows you're coming, but she's back at the house. And so Martha goes back and says, the teacher comes and is calling for you. And as soon as she heard that, she arose quickly and came to him. So she's sitting at home, feeling a bit grieved, and she isn't going to Jesus. She's kind of holding back. So Martha, when something went wrong, Martha goes to Jesus and so pours out her heart to him. But Mary stays at home and sort of doesn't. She withdraws. But Jesus sends and says, Mary, come. Like he called for her. Mary, come and I want to see you without all the people wailing around the house. I want you to come and slip out as well. So she did. She arose quickly and came. And Jesus hadn't yet come into the town, but was in the place where Martha met him. So he just waited. He didn't come into the town. He just waited for Mary. Mary was the one who later covered his feet with that precious spikenard. Then the Jews who were with her in the house and comforting her, when they saw that Mary rose up quickly, this time they followed Mary. They didn't follow Martha, but they followed her and ran after her and thought she was going to the tomb. But actually, of course, she was going to see Jesus. And when she arrived at Jesus, she fell down at his feet, saying to him, Lord, if you'd been here, my brother wouldn't have died. So the same thing, she says the same thing. Obviously, Martha and Mary had both talked about it. They say, if only Jesus had come, he wouldn't have died. And they say, yeah, if only Jesus had have come, if only Jesus had done it, what he was going to do in our timing, like everything would be okay. But they were limited by their understanding of Jesus' timing. They both reacted in different ways. One blurted out her complaint to Jesus. The other held back and was quiet and kind of withdrew, maybe buried her feelings, might have struggled to express them when Jesus arrived. She was almost too hurt, maybe. It was only when Jesus called her specifically by name that she had the courage to go and see him and say something to him. And I think sometimes when we get discouraged or we think that something hasn't gone the way it should have for us, or there was a delay, or the outcome wasn't right, we can be like Mary and kind of just sit on a chair and feel a bit down and discouraged and kind of not engage with Jesus. We kind of made a value judgment about it, and it can work against us. Jesus says, no, come out of that place where you've got on your own, just contemplating what went wrong. Come out of that place and engage with me. I want to show you something. I want to show you something. I want to tell you something. And I want to show you something. And then he says, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? And that's a word for us. Jesus says that when everything seems to go wrong, and everything's out of time, out of kilter, the wrong result, everything seems to have gone against us. Jesus said, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? And everything in our lives are worked so that the glory of God will be revealed in our lives, and all the various thousands of thoughts Jesus has. How precious are your thoughts unto me, O Lord. how great is the sum of them. They're more in number than the sand. I was actually on a beach in Cornwall yesterday, and I said, just think how many grains of sand. There's sand everywhere, beautiful white sand, and just thinking of that, how many thoughts Jesus has for us, good thoughts. And of course, this was one thought that Jesus had for Mary and Martha, that if Lazarus, their brother, died and then rose again from the dead, they would see the glory of God. That was kind of one thought out of the many thoughts, as numerous as the sand on the seashore. And so for us, Jesus is planning in layers and layers, day by day, year by year, decade by decade. His plan goes forward into the future, beyond time. We can't possibly imagine how amazing his thoughts and plans are for us. But certainly sometimes when we receive a word or scripture or a promise, we thought we'd had a promise from God, and it doesn't seem to happen within the time frame that we expect. They thought, if we call Jesus, he'll be here within it only takes a couple of days to get down to Jerusalem from Galilee. If you walk hard, they assumed that that's what would happen, but it didn't. In fact, he died, and Jesus didn't turn up for 4 whole days. So they were by then feeling like very let down by Jesus, and they said so. But Jesus just said, didn't I tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? He was just saying to them, look, just keep on trusting me a bit longer. You're going to see the most amazing thing. But they started weeping because they couldn't control themselves, obviously, and he also wept. He says, where have you laid him? Where have you put your brother, the one that has died? Like if we have a dream and it's died, it's like Jesus says, what have you done with that dream? Where have you put it? Where have you buried it? What cave have you locked it up in and closed the door, rolled a stone over it? And it's a bit like lock the door and throw away the key. You put this great big stone over the hole where you buried that precious thing. Whether it's obviously in their case it was a person, but in our case it could be something else precious to us, which is somehow we've lost hope in an area. Jesus says, what have you done with that? What have you done? Where is it? Let me see it. Let me at it. Let me have that bit of you where you've given up hope. Let me see it, like when we got a boil and it needs lancing, it needs bursting to get all the abscess gunge out. Jesus said, let me have a look at it. I need to get at it. So she says, okay, Jesus, come and see. Lord, come and see. So Jesus wept. And all the Jews around says, gosh, see how he loved him, Lazarus. See how Jesus loved Lazarus. And they sort of said, well, couldn't this man who opened the eyes of the blind have kept this man from dying? That's just human reasoning that we need to resist, judging God on a human reasoning kind of level. Then Jesus, groaning in himself, came to the tomb, and it was a cave, and a stone lay against it. And Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha, the sister of him who was dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there's a stench, for he's been dead 4 days. And I think in the King James it said, Lord, by this time he stinketh. He stinketh. I don't know. Wow, yeah. 4 days in that climate, and she was still not expecting a good outcome. But Jesus says, did I not say to you that if you would believe, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone where the dead man was lying, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you, you've heard me, and I know that you always hear me, but because of the people standing by, I said this, that they may believe that you sent me. Now when he said these things, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come forth. And he who had died came out, bound hand and foot with grave clothes, and his face was wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said, loose him and let him go. Loose him, almost like you would say when you're praying a deliverance prayer. Loose him and let him go. And that's exactly what happened. They took the grave clothes off, and there he was. And all the Jews had witnessed it. Some praised God and followed Jesus. Others went to the Pharisees, but the thing was they'd witnessed it, and the truth was out, and they saw and experienced the glory of God. And that's what we will experience if we let Jesus have his way, if we let Jesus choose the timing of things in our lives that we, as I heard Mike Bickle say today, if we give up our rights, we have to give up our rights to when things happen, how things happen, what things happen. We should give up our rights and let Jesus decide the best way for us, the best thing, the best outcome. Not bury our dead in our hearts in like a grief place, but come to Jesus with them. Express our doubts and fears, yes, but be honest with Jesus, but above all, just let him be Lord. Give up our rights. Let him be the one who shows us his glory, really. We want to witness his glory, don't we? All of us, we want to witness the power of God and what God can really do. But sometimes that requires something to die before it can be resurrected. And obviously, the bit where it dies is unpleasant and scary. But when it is raised from the dead, or we see the miracle, then, wow, then that's the time when we see the glory of God. So yeah, that's it really, that for us, just to remember that. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God? So, Jesus, we want to say that we believe you, we believe in you, we believe in your timing. We give up our rights to know the rights when we think things should happen by, the rights to have you do things for us when we want them and things like that, all those kind of things. And we just say to you, do things in your timing, Lord. We want to see the glory of God, and we want you to work through us and show us incredible things, just like Mary and Martha did. And Mary, of course, was so affected by what she saw and how Jesus raised her brother from the dead, that it really touched her heart deeply. Any sense of holding back from Jesus and being offended had gone. Jesus had healed that. And the very next bit of the chapter, well, after John 11, is when she puts the oil on Jesus' feet, that beautiful, fragrant spikenard oil, which was worth, I think, was it 300 denarii, which is 300 days' wages, which well, it's like a year's salary, really, isn't it? If you think of an average year's salary, that's how much that ointment cost. But she was able to freely pour that out onto Jesus because she'd yielded to him and saw that he had her best interests at heart and the whole family's best interests at heart. She was able to do that. So we also will be able to do that when we just hand over all our hurts, griefs to him and just allow him to do things to fulfill his promises in his timing, and all the wonderful promises he's promised to us. We just need to hang on to those and not give up on them, not discard them. Like, where you screw a piece of paper up and chuck it in the bin. It's like a final act. I don't ever do that with what God says, but just keep it. As Mary's, it says about Mary, it says she kept those things in her heart. When Jesus said to her about, when the angel said to her about the birth of Jesus and Simeon prophesied about what Jesus would do later. It says that she kept, or she pondered those things in her heart. So we too, we must keep God's words in our hearts and keep believing them, because the believing and trusting him for the right timing and the right outcome is what will show us the glory of God. Amen.